So good morning, everyone. So I'm between you and lunch, so we're going to go straight at it. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the Hampton Roads HRGCC for putting on a special event. You put on a special event last night. I'm sure you're going to have a great lunch, and you'll put on a special event tonight as well. So there is nothing better for the Port of Virginia than to recruit 450 people over lunch to go out and be our ambassadors. So thank you very much to HRGC, to Kevin, and thank you, Taylor, for the hospitality of Virginia Beach. I hope to walk you through a little journey, but I want to kick off with what is the vision of the Port of Virginia. Just because I'm going to take you through a few of the sentences. Diverse talent, just so you're aware, there are 34 of my colleagues in the room today, dotted around a suitable number of tables. 34 out of about 490 folk who manage in the port, and about 2,500 longshore men and women, all of whom work 360, 24/7, and couldn't say more about them other than they are a high-performing team, and we're delighted to have 34 of my colleagues here today. So I just want to pick out a few parts of the vision and hope that they resonate with you, because I'm going to spend the next half an hour talking about them, so I hope they do. One is set the pace of today. So we're going to have a look at calendar year 22 and say, how did we do? How did the Port of Virginia operate in calendar year 22? And then, as Kevin pointed out, the market is very different. So what's changing? What's going on in the market? What are the dynamics that are going to change? And then finally, course for tomorrow. So are we the best placed port for tomorrow? And I'll let you be the judge of that. So from an agenda perspective, did we set the pace? What's going on in the market? And how are we accelerating the Port of Virginia to grasp the opportunity that we think is ahead of us? Let's go on to calendar year 22. How did we perform? So just a quick reminder of how we operate. We operate with what we call the Virginia model. We know that in the terms of the Virginia model, it means we're the Port Authority, a statutory body, with a political subdivision responsible for a number of things in the harbor. But what sets us apart is we're also the terminal operator, the chassis pool operator, asset and equipment owner, and the technology integrator. So really, if the supply chain is not working in Virginia, there's 494 of us, 34 of my colleagues, and myself, who you can all come and talk to about it and say, something's wrong. But it does, and I hope I can prove this, show that we can give out some exceptional product and exceptional service through what have been some outstandingly difficult last 2 years. So if I can start off quickly on business continuity. It's not something that we talk about much in events like this, but I do just want to talk a little bit about business continuity, because we went through 2022 and we went through without an interruption. We've put $900,000 into a new cybersecurity operating center, and thank you to the Coast Guard for your help with that, because we secured some grant money for that purpose. And that cybersecurity operations center is something that works actually quite hard. The international supply chains are prone to cyber attacks simply because of the international nature of business. They're also prone to the fact that a lot of people in the world think the Port of Virginia has got something to do with the Navy, even if we don't. But therefore, a lot of people like to think that a cyber attack on us is a good thing to do. So we have a very strong cybersecurity operations center. And we've reinvested in our maritime incident and recovery team, the MERT, headed up by Bill Burkett. And it's Bill who's in the photograph. He's somewhere in the room. I can't vouch for where. We're updating our police force. And tomorrow, I'm delighted that we will actually be giving out to 2 police officers, to a longshoreman, and to one of our managers some life-saving awards for a life-saving event they performed on our terminals from a cardiac arrest. That's going to be one of our great events tomorrow. And we also have with us Captain Stockwell, the captain of the port, and all of our business continuity is coordinated by the Coast Guard, and I really would refer to the Coast Guard in this harbor as a super collaborator. They really do a great job for us. So no interruptions in 22. That's a good start. If we move on to within the port, what's been going on with ships? So last year, we had about 6,500 ship movements in the port, all of them piloted by Captain Chisholm and his group of excellent pilots. It was not a Virginia pilot who put the ship aground up the Chesapeake Bay. That was a Maryland pilot, just so we're all clear. But just like what I did want to pick out of the slide is look at the increase in bulk. So when we look at container ships, I'm going to talk a lot about containers today, but let's just talk a little bit about bulk. For 2 reasons. The Ukrainian crisis caused a demand for coal. This port, Norfolk Southern coming through Lambert's Point, CSX coming through Newport News, a lot more coal has been leaving this harbor. And there's also an agricultural boom, and people like Purdue have had a very, very strong year on bulk shipments coming out of the harbour. That's why those numbers are up so great, because the ag trades are booming and coal moving very strongly as well. If you think forward, in 2025, the harbour will have year-round cruise ships. So that will again increase the number of ship movements. So we really are becoming a multifaceted gateway, a multifaceted port. With that, I'll move on to how the Port of Virginia performed. 2022, quite different from the marketplace of today. It was our record year. 3.7 million TEU, 20-foot equivalent units in containers. That's a record for us. And what you'll see here, it's a record across the board. The export lift is a record, the import lift is a record, the rail lift is a record, the barge lift is a record, and the truck handling is a record. So it's always nice to stand up and say we performed well, but it really truly was a case that the port actually processed more cargo last year than we've ever done before. We also employed more people, our longshore men and women. Our hours were up 15%. The median income of all the longshore men and women was up 10%. And that's to do with hours worked, it's to do with royalty payments. But when you consider where inflation was last year, it's nice to see more work and more income going into our longshore men and women. I want to talk a little bit about operational safety. As I said, we operated uninterrupted, record volumes, challenging year on the supply chain, and we are improving our operational safety performance. 2 years ago, we set out to say we're going to halve our safety outcomes in 5 years. We're going to be 50% better within 5 years. We're well ahead of the curve. And we will now be refocusing our efforts looking forward to say, how do we not only make the Port of Virginia the best port in America, how do we make it sure that we're also the safest port in America as well? So let's talk about how did the Virginia model operate? Did we do what we're supposed to do in providing the rest of the supply chain good service? So overall, I think our report card here would be around about a B+. A's in certain products, B's in other products. Our truck turn times improved. Record truck volumes, truck turn times improved on some of the longest dwelling cargo that we've seen ever. Our rail improved. And if we think that through on the supply chain of 2022, when there were problems in Columbus, or there were problems in Kansas City, or there were problems in Chicago, it really shows how the Virginia model can work, how our operating team can collaborate with Norfolk Southern or with CSX and say, if you have a problem in Kansas, I'll expedite Chicago. If you have a problem in Chicago, I'll expedite another location. That works. We haven't got competing terminal interests. We can make it work, and the outcome is in the numbers. And we lost a little bit of ground on our crane productivity. We believe we can get that back and more in 2023. The last piece I'll talk to you about in service metrics, if you all recall this time last year, turn it back 12 months, there were quite a few ships off the coast of California. There were ships in a few other locations. Shipping lines were being blamed for inflation. And there were people such as White House envoys who were charged with fixing the supply chain. We've met the White House envoy once for breakfast. We've never had a call, we've never had a meeting, but we did get a nice letter that said you're the gold standard. So I think our performance last year was great. The fact we don't have to talk to the White House is something we don't wish to be involved with. We want to just run our business and run it well. So we were pleased with that. So did good volumes, record issues to deal with end up in good financial results? The answer to that is yes. Here you can see our operating revenues grew 27%. Our expenses grew 16%. So that shows we've got efficient terminals. We can push volumes, we can push revenues through efficient terminals. We did spend more on maintenance. We spent quite a lot more on maintenance as we made sure all of our equipment was up. So we deliberately put some money into that maintenance spend to keep our uptime. And most importantly, our operating income, our earnings are up substantively. And I'll come back a little later in the presentation to say, as you all know in the room, our shareholder is the Commonwealth of Virginia. And thankfully, the Commonwealth of Virginia doesn't need a dividend, and therefore we can reinvest 100% of this straight back into the port. And I'll demonstrate to you a little later how that's going on, how we will be doing that. Solid metrics, improved financials, makes improved ratings. S&P upgraded us during the year to A stable. That's an improvement from A1. And just by example, yesterday we priced some bonds in the marketplace for about a $200 million debt raise yesterday, slightly different from our debt. We were also helped with some securities from the Commonwealth, 3 times oversubscribed. So just to give a view of how the financial markets look at us as a whole, we were 3 times oversubscribed yesterday on a successful debt raise to also help with our expansions. So in the last 2 years, every one of us in this room, all of us decided to do something to our house. Guarantee it. I guarantee you bought some furniture, guarantee you upgraded a room because we were all in lockdown and we all bought goods. So these huge volume growths that have come into our business in the last 2 years, we've done okay. I'm a first is good guy, so second is kind of okay for me. But we did say, when you look at these volume growths for the last 2 years, that's really an exceptional performance for the port as a whole. Now we're in 2023, and the market's not growing. The market's actually, as Kevin said, is in decline year over year. So the issue now is even more important from a business perspective. What is your relative performance on the way down? Nobody asks you, well, how's your relative performance on the way up? Everybody asks what's relative performance on the way down. The interesting thing is if you turn this graph for the first quarter of this year, it would pretty much be the same batting order. Houston, followed by us, followed by Georgia, et cetera, in terms of who's had the least impact from the year, and that the West Coast ports have had the worst, and I'll come back onto that. If we perform well, Hampton Roads does well. This is employment 2022 over pre-COVID 2019. Transportation and warehousing is up for the Hampton Roads area. So as you can see, if the supply chain business goes well, we can grow jobs. What I'm particularly delighted about is a lot of work that we've been doing with Jason Alcubi and the Virginia Economic Development Partnership and with the Trade and Commerce team, as well as the transportation team in the administration, which is really to say, what industries can Virginia win in? One of the things we've said is we can win in transport and logistics, and we can win in the Norfolk-Richmond corridor on transport and logistics. And that's really, for the next year as we go ahead, is how can we elevate Virginia's comparative advantage? We have a comparative advantage. How do we now take that to market? So if I summarize 2022, these numbers compare fiscal year 22 over fiscal year 21. Fiscal years are a little difficult. Calendar years, they're slightly different. But most importantly, when we do well as a supply chain, everything improves in how we touch the Commonwealth. And essentially now, the Port of Virginia is touching about 12% of jobs within Virginia as a whole. And you can see some quite remarkable numbers in how we're now reprocessing cargo in Virginia as a whole, and what that is now contributing to the overall economy, and why it's so important that we elevate what we're doing. So that was 22. Now I really want to go to the next chapter of this presentation and say, what's changing? What is happening in our marketplace that is going to change, and what are those dynamics that are now happening? And I think one of the most important messages for everybody is never waste a crisis. We had a supply chain crisis. We performed exceptionally well. How are we going to come through it? So I'm going to quickly run through some slides that talk about what we believe are the changing dynamics. I'm going to start with decarbonization. These are 6 quotes. We didn't attribute them because we know when you attribute them, you forget somebody who said, why not me? But these are 6 folk who are the biggest customers of the port or the biggest users of the port. We're not all users of ports. But what you'll see is every single company in supply chain is saying, how do we decarbonize? How do we take carbon out of the supply chain? It's a massive and exciting challenge, and it's something that I will come back to as to how we are addressing going forward, as I will with all of these. A few more quotes. These are the end of the quotes. These are attributed. This is digitalization. And what does that mean? It's a hugely exciting time in digitalization. But if you think what happened in the last 2.5 years, everybody said, how do we operate? How do we move goods? How do we keep the train on the rails, or how do we keep things moving? And now we're saying, how do we decarbonize and how do we digitalize? And that really will show, I think, the further leadership potential that we have as a port. So our ocean carriers are our customers. They had their most profitable years in the last 2 years, the most profitable years ever. And similar to most businesses in supply chain, they're reinvesting. The end result is ultra-large container vessels are being built at a much, much faster speed than anybody had forecast. I'll let the Navy do their flyby, and then I'll just carry on. Thank you, Navy. But the most important thing of this slide is to show what is happening with this size of ship. The largest ship we have calling in Virginia today is 16,000 TEU. It commenced with the CMA CGM Marco Polo in May of 2021. The top of those ultra-large container vessels now are 24,000 TEU. That is 50% bigger than any ship on this coast. They're all operating Asia-Europe, but we never said we'd have 16. So we can pretty much guarantee we're going to see 20 plus. We just don't know when it's going to come, but it is going to come because that is the logic of how we're going to run the supply chain going forward. So we have to be ready. The West Coast is losing market share. There's tons of people in our business who commentate on this. So it's not our job to opine why they're losing market share. Our job is to say there's an opportunity because they're losing market share, and that opportunity is for Virginia to grab that market share. If you're losing about 0.8% of your market share off the West Coast each year, you're losing 800,000 TEU. The question is, where is it going to go? Is it going to go to New Jersey, Pennsylvania? Is it going to go to Georgia? Is it going to go to Texas, or is it going to come to Virginia? And our job, of course, is to make it come to Virginia. So that's the opportunity of this significant market share move from the West Coast. And it isn't yesterday's event. This is a 20-year event that has been ongoing. And there's certainly no sign today that that will change. We also have shifting source locations. Probably a number of us in the room have heard of China Plus One. China Plus One came really around during the Trump administration when tariffs were put on a number of Chinese manufactured goods. So everybody said, okay, let's have China plus an alternative. Now we hear the term Alt-Asia, right? So where else in Asia do we go to produce? The slide at the bottom is our growth and where it's coming from. So what you can see in the graph is the Indian subcontinent is our fastest growing source location. The Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, North Europe, and also Northeast Asia, which is still strong Chinese growth. But as you look at the other four, all of them lend themselves to routes through the Suez Canal. Every one of them says the logical route to bring those goods to market is on ships through the Suez Canal. Goes back to ultra-large container vessels, which can come through the Suez Canal. So the important thing for us as a port is how do we attract those services and how do we make sure they're putting us in the right place in their rotation? And how do we get the port coverage of ports such as Haiphong and Jakarta, which we've added to the portfolio this year? If we're going to take that East Coast market share, we need port-centric import facilities. We have strong demand for import transload or import distribution. CBRE has just said that Richmond, Norfolk is a top emerging market. And I think the point there is emerging. It doesn't say we are the top market. It doesn't say we are an established market. It says we're an emerging market. And we should all remind ourselves in Hampton Roads that's what we are. We're emerging. And the emerging is the opportunity. Our vacancy rate on industrial property at the moment in Hampton Roads is 1.1%. AKA full. So we can build as much capacity as we want in the port, but we've got to match it outside of the port. And that's something we'll also talk to. And the other one is export transload. Think through some of the problems of the supply chain and of the last 2 years and who got hurt the most. The people who got hurt the most were West Coast agricultural exporters. What we did was said we have to protect the exporter from Virginia or the exporters through the East Coast and make sure our capacity is available to the importer and the exporter. We were with the governor in Richmond looking at the facility on the photograph here only 2 weeks ago when he announced that Virginia had had a record year last year on agriculture. We just had in March this year, like last month, a record export month ever. We broke 100,000 TEUs for the first time ever in the port's history to show there is a booming market at the moment in both agricultural and resins. So just to summarize what we believe are the market dynamics: fast moving for decarbonization, digitalization, larger ships coming much quicker, opportunity with market share movement, opportunity with shifting source, and this demand for industrial product. So my last chapter really is how do we accelerate? How do we accelerate what we have and go and grab that market? There is a transition period, of course, with the market reset going on, but now is the opportunity. And I believe, or I hope, that when I finish, you'll all agree that we're very, very well placed as the port to grab the opportunities. Starting with decarbonization. So we have said that the Port of Virginia will be net zero carbon by 2040 on Scope 1 and Scope 2. And what the graph shows you is what we told you last year in a hashed line that said this is the line we're going to go down as we decarbonize. And what you can see is we're accelerating past that line. We're doing better. And you'll see it really is in the green. It comes from electricity. So it takes deliberate action to decarbonize an operation. And we took it because we entered power purchase agreements, primarily with Dominion Energy, but also with Rappahannock in the north of Virginia. So we now know that come next year, when the next one solar farm adds to our electrical purchase, that we will be 100% clean electric. And then you can see the pathway as we work forward as to how do you change other equipment from diesel to either electric or diesel to hydrogen. But we're ahead of plan, and in realistic terms, we're ahead of every other port. Because when we look at where California is going, yes, they're going to clean equipment, but the equivalent terminal in California is on 1% clean electric. We're currently on 67% clean electric. It's a very, very different picture. So we think we're in good shape. So let's go to digitalization. Very quickly on digitalization, where are we? So single view of the market. One web portal called ProPass gives everybody one view of the market. It's great for small users of the port. It's great for big users of the port. Now we can go to grouped appointments. Think of grouped appointments as large trucking operations that can come in with grouped appointments where we can assign truckers to available units house kept within our modern terminals. You'll hear the word in the marketplace, digital twin. A digital twin says, I have a model running on the side that looks exactly like our operation. We've had it for years. It was just called emulation in those days. Now it's called a digital twin. But just as an example, what that does to us is if we're doing a systems upgrade, we run it completely through the digital twin. So if you see us put an announcement up that says, next Saturday we're going to close for a few hours whilst we do an upgrade, and then you hear us say, whoa, it's deferred, because we just did that, what it really means is the digital twin identified the problem. So we didn't impact the operation as we did it. Application Programming Interface, API, you can see on the graph the quick uptake. When we put API into the market, huge uptake from the users. By the end of this year, we expect that to be significantly higher. And then artificial intelligence. What's the right thing to do with artificial intelligence? And where we've started is to improve safety outcomes. So we are using AI within the terminals to identify unsafe practices, unsafe behaviors, unsafe environments. Incredibly powerful tools that will allow us to really drive our safety performance. If we think about this investment, 27 miles outside of the window on a clear day, you might be able to see these windmills when they're built. This is the coastal Virginia offshore wind farm that is being built by Dominion Energy, and the investment we're making is $220 million. So $220 million to improve Portsmouth Marine Terminal into a real heavy-use offshore wind staging area. The first components come through this terminal in October this year, 1,000-ton monopiles. Just think that through, 1,000 tons going across a dock in Portsmouth, and if you know what's below the ground in Portsmouth, it's just blue mud. So it's supposed to just squelch. So you can see the engineering that's going in here to be ready. So we're doing our part to make sure we're ready for the clean energy that's going to come to Virginia Beach. So ultra-large container vessels provide challenges, and thank you to the Army Corps of Engineers for the partnership we have in dredging these channels. First and foremost, we're going to have two-way channels. Our road in and out of the harbor today for an ultra-large container vessel is one way. It's also one way in Savannah, it's also one way in New York, New Jersey. We're going to move to two ways, and we'll have the first two-way transits later this year. That advantage is quicker turnaround on our berths. Ships will start working quicker, we won't have as much downtime on our docks. And then at the end of 24, 55-foot channels. Ships, the largest ships in the world, can come in, or container ships can come in unimpeded. No longer will we be asking our ocean carriers to leave some tons behind in the Mediterranean or leave some tons behind in Asia. They can come in full. And likewise, the bulk carriers heading out with the coal to Europe, they can leave 5 foot deeper than they do today. There's advantages for our trade, there's advantages for the bulk trades as well. We're modernizing and expanding the northern end of Norfolk International Terminals. It's our least utilized part of the port today. $650 million of investments. We're financing it through the bonds that we priced yesterday, through our own retained earnings, and we're taking some equity from the Commonwealth of Virginia. And thank you to the General Assembly members who are here today for your strong support in allowing us to bring this project to market. Of that $650 million, we placed $510 million of contracts last week, which will allow us to start the construction, build the equipment. So we will have shovels going into the ground very shortly, and we'll have some very busy construction contracts and some very busy crane contracting going on, starting straight away. For handling larger ships, we need larger cranes, and we need a lot of them, because these ships are getting bigger quicker. So we currently have 9 on order, and when we are complete, we'll have 20 of our 31 cranes, ultra-large container vessel, ready. So 65% of our cranes will be capable of handling the largest ships in the world, and we'll be ready with the extra cranes, the ones we're adding to our existing fleet, in Q1 of 25. So think back a little bit. We said dredging would be 25. Cranes will be ready in 25. End of 24, there will be significant ultra-large container vessel capacity in this port. If source locations are shifting and cargo is going to come through the Suez Canal, we need to connect it by rail. So we're adding 30% of efficient rail capacity. Also at North NIT, or between North NIT and South NIT, this will be ready 2024. So our investment program, and I'm going to come on to what the state's doing shortly, but what we're doing at the Port of Virginia is about $1.4 billion of gateway investments. And think of it as enhancing the port and being ready for Suez Canal, big ships, large ships through the Panama Canal, and strong service levels that we've been delivering for so many years. A bigger, wider channel, a bigger, greater terminal, an offshore wind capability, and tying together a greater rail outreach. It's a very exciting program, most of which, in fact, all of it apart from the second phase of North NIT, will be complete in the 2024-2025 timeframes. We'll have 3.6 million TEU of capacity at North NIT when it's finished. That will add to 2.2 million TEU of capacity in Virginia International Gateways, and that total then for us as a container port will be 5.8 million. Fully ULCV capable, with 152 clean electric automated stacking cranes. Just to put that in perspective, 152. New York has 20. LA has 29. Long Beach has 70. Nobody else has any in America. So we will be more than double the next player in the automated stacking crane area. So then how does all this investment, how does this fit together with our growth, or with the growth plans that we hope to bring together to expand the Commonwealth? So if we've got shifting source locations, we need more reach. And we've worked with the Norfolk Southern to add Memphis into our reach. Why is Memphis so important? Again, Suez Canal routings to Memphis as opposed to via the West Coast. And it's important because Memphis is the second largest inland hub for logistics after Chicago. Why is Memphis so big? There's a small company based there called FedEx. That creates a massive critical mass that a lot of companies have taken advantage of. So that's why it's so important that we manage to add Memphis to the routes of Suez Canal and Indian subcontinent routings. As we've all pointed and clicked and bought everything in the last couple of years, the whole supply chain of how we supply goods to our port, as opposed to how we supply goods to the mile, has changed. The speed of trucking from ports into markets is incredibly important. So what do we need? We need an integrated freight strategy. We need integration with all of the state's other expansions so that we don't impact the host communities for the port and we don't impact the host communities for freight. If you're not from Virginia, the map is a rough drawing of this part of Virginia as a whole. The right-hand side is a rendition of Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. So just to put this into perspective, this now has General Assembly bipartisan support. Recent legislation just passed that every locality must put in their local comprehensive plans freight corridors. The General Assembly also approved what's known as the Transportation Opportunity Fund, which will give more discretion to the administration to support investment in the Commonwealth. Both of those are great initiatives. When we stood up here a year ago, we said that the Secretary of Transportation was going to find the funding for the I-64. Well, he found the funding. We've got $600 million, I believe, for the Secretary has found, so we can now expand I-64. And Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is a $3.5 billion infrastructure project. I actually believe it's the largest infrastructure project on the East Coast, or probably in the United States. So when we think about, we have 1.4 billion of port improvements, but just what is on this map all adds up to over $5 billion of road and other improvements for the Commonwealth. So every single one of these will enhance the capability of moving freight quickly and efficiently through Hampton Roads. And most importantly, the biggest ones, such as Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, actually come online in the 25 to 26 timeframes. So very much in line with how we expand as a whole. So is the market responding? We believe it is. This is a map of active developments from developers in the Hampton Roads region. These being active in the sense that they are announced and known. And remember, we're at 1.1% vacancy rate today. So across our region, spread across Hampton Roads, we've got great investment going on from a number of people who are in the room today, and that will allow us to keep pushing product into the marketplace. So we believe we can develop the premier logistics ecosystem. We believe we're on our way. And if I look at the last 18 months, just to give some context, these are either announced, expanded, or open facilities. So it really affects just the last 18 months, not what was already here. We've got a lot of developers working. So developers are creating that product, giving us that product that will allow us to sell the region for logistics as a whole. We've got a lot of third-party logistics companies entering, the people who can actually operate facilities efficiently for mid-sized companies or large companies. Some are expansions of existing facilities from people who are in the region. Some are new entrants to our market who are very welcome to come and add their skills and their value that they bring to the market. And that's attracting the beneficial cargo owner, the people who ultimately own the cargo, who are making their announcements and their expansions into Virginia as a whole. And all of these are, as I say, publicly known, publicly announced. Some of them are open, some are expansions, and some are in the pipeline. But it's a very key demonstration of how we can exploit the advantages of the gateway. And of course, there are still some things missing. And our job is to go hunt them and make sure that they come and land in our state as a whole. So I'm going to finish on that note, and I'm going to cover just one real summary to try and wrap up my presentation. First of all, calendar year 22. It was an exceptional year. It was an exceptional year in supply chain. The Virginia model worked exceptionally well. We gave really good service levels, really good product to our ocean carriers, to the trucking community, to the beneficial cargo owners. So we know our model works. The market is changing quickly. It's now all about decarbonization, more efficient supply chains, digitalization to improve processes. How do we use and modernize with artificial intelligence in a sensible way? We believe we're well ahead on that game, and we also believe we're well ahead on building the core infrastructure needed. All the investments that have been approved and are being made to build deepest, widest channels, largest cranes, bigger berths, automation. That's all happening. And it's coupled with all of those, and then we've changed to also couple that with what the state is doing as a whole. So what I would just leave you with is, I believe that Virginia has a huge opportunity to accelerate into the space, to build the best premier ecosystem for logistics, and I hope you'll come and join me on that journey, and hopefully look back in a few years' time and say, we got there and we did it. And with that, thank you, and thank you for your commitment to our gateway.